Hey guys, BJ the Brave here, back with some more Warpforge content, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a review of Warpforge and answering the question, is Warpforge any good? In 2024, we are about to go into September. Some people may have never heard of the game, you may have not tried it yet, you may have tried it earlier and be coming back to it and be curious kind of like how the game's been developing. And I just kind of wanted to give some impressions today and a bit of a review and overview of where I think the game is and, you know, what's the good, the bad, the ugly, and ultimately finish with kind of like what my score out of 10 I would give this game. So very quickly, just for context and just also to get my biases out of the way, I mean, I've been playing CCGs for a long time now. When I was about 5 years old, I think I cut up an Argos catalogue and made my own top trump. So I've always had an affinity for card games. But I've played, you know, since obviously the Hearthstone revolution, played lots and lots of different CCGs. So all the big ones, if you name it, I've probably played it. And I currently also play Magic the Gathering as well right now. So a big lover of CCGs, and I just want to say right off the bat, I really love Warpforge. Okay, I used to work for Games Workshop, big fan of the IP, but even just purely as a card game, I really do love Warpforge. So that is kind of like, just so you know, like that's what my bias is bringing into this. However, that said, just because I love the game and obviously create content for it and play the game every day pretty much, I do want to kind of like work through the objectives of what I think is kind of good and what is bad. So bear that in mind. Obviously, this is just my opinion, guys. Let me know in the comments if there's things I missed that you really think should have been kind of pointed out in terms of what's good about the game and what's bad. Definitely get involved in the comments there. But, you know, bear in mind, like, this is not like a comprehensive review of absolutely everything. It's just my opinion and sharing kind of like some of the first thoughts that come to mind when I think about what's good and what's bad in Warpforge. Alright, cool. So as I say, we're coming into September. That means that I've been playing the game since the start of early access, which was about 10 months ago now. So we're almost coming up onto 1 year. My understanding is it's going to come out of early access fairly soon. Alright, so without further ado, guys, let's jump on in. So the first thing that I want to say that's good about Warpforge is the ladder system. Now, we just recently got a complete overhaul of the ladder system, and it's something that EG, who is the developer, they've been working quite hard on for some time now in the background. And for anyone who has played like Magic or Hearthstone or any of the other games, when you first join Warpforge, it's going to seem kind of familiar. Start off at kind of like iron rank, and as you earn wins you kind of gain progress, and you kind of work through from like a 5 to 1, and then you go up to you know, we've got like bronze, silver, gold, whatever. So there's like different tiers to kind of climb the ladder. And the good thing is, in the early days, like if you lose, you don't necessarily go down a rank. So it really encourages you to kind of like play on ranked and not worry about not having all the full collection or being great. And that's pretty standard in card games, and it's pretty normal. You only need one deck, so if you like love chaos or you just want to focus your collection on one particular faction, for example, you can go ahead and do that. Now, where the ladder system changes is when you hit legend rank, and when you hit legend rank, you actually manage to open up the new system, and that looks a lot like this. So when you hit legend rank, what happens is your ladder rating, your global rating, turns into a number. This is your kind of MMR. And that number is essentially the average of your top 4 factions' score posted that season. Now, I'm not going to get into tons of detail because I don't want to lose you if you're new to the game. But what that basically means is that at the legend rank, you have to basically play and commit to playing with 4 factions, and it will take the average of that. And it's one of my favorite things about the system. What makes it so brilliant is that if we are in, say, binary metas where, say, the Aeldari are like really broken, there's a really broken deck. We kind of had this with the ultramarines last couple of seasons ago. What that basically means is you're not just getting the top 50 players just all playing the same broken deck. because they have to think about the other three factions. Also, when it comes to playing against different factions, you're not just coming up against the same broken deck. So it adds variety to the gameplay, and it doesn't get boring and stale. So I really do love the ladder system. There's quite a lot of fun in trying out different factions and figuring out what's going to be your top 4. This is the first season, and I already kind of realized that I definitely didn't play it right in terms of picking the top 4, although that's because the meta shifted. Another cool thing about the ladder is that you when you post a score for each faction, it's actually your top score. So let's say you went on a 10-win streak and you got yourself up to 3,000 MMR, and then you suddenly lost 5 games. Your current score would fall, so you can see here in the Eldar, for example, my current score is actually... Let's take the Orkz, for example. So my Orkz current score, 3,034, is lower than my highest score, which was 3,092, right? So if we win on that win streak, we post a really high score, then we lose and our current score drops, our high score doesn't go away. It's our high score that contributes to your global rating. So this is just fantastic. It allows you to still experiment a little bit with different factions and not feel too bad like if you lose a few, because you can always jump to a different faction and come back later and try and get back up to peak score. So overall, I think that the ladder system has been a fantastic addition to Warpforge. The only thing that I've seen like this was the Gwent Pro League, and it was a fantastic system there, and I think it's a real pro when it comes to playing Warpforge. Alright, the next thing that's great about Warpforge is that it's based in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and I know because I used to work for Games Workshop for about 8 years, so I'm kind of embroiled in this. I've been playing collecting the hobby since I was... Oh God, I don't know, about 20 odd years I've been doing that. So it's got a really strong IP, filled with brilliant imagery, and I think EG have done a great job bringing that to life. Whether it's the voice lines, even things like the audio, like when you play for example, a Space Marine card, the bullets sounds when you attack with a ranged attack, the bullet sounds that come out are very much like a fan of ultramarines will hear the kind of bolt gun or the heavy bolter, shell. So even the sounds of the bullets kind of like are really specific to each of the factions. So all that is just to say that they've done a great job bringing the IP to life. It's fun. The factions are very colourful and vibrant and very distinct. And yeah, the 40k IP really brings this card game to life. Okay, so next up, I would say the gameplay is quite easy. Anyone who's played Hearthstone will know that one of the things that made Hearthstone so great when it first hit the scene is that the general mechanics of Hearthstone were pretty simple. Now, I do have a Warpforge Fundamentals series on my channel. If you're new, you want to go and check out, just go check out number 1, which is how to play Warpforge. And I walk through, what those mechanics are and how a game works. But what you're going to find is it's quite easy to pick up and play. I would say that there are games out there like Magic the Gathering and even things like Legends of Runeterra, where they have some very clever mechanics in those games, but they're definitely not easy to pick up and understand. And actually, as a beginner, they can be quite off-putting. It can feel a little bit overwhelming. None of that here in Warpforge. Very simple. You have a warlord with a certain amount of health. Your opponent has one, and it's who can beat them down first. Playing your cards, attack enemy cards or attack face, and it's kind of like this back and forth. When it's my turn, I get to play my stuff. When it's your turn, you get to play your stuff. There's no kind of like interaction between turns like there is in other games. So all that is just to say that the general gameplay is very beginner friendly. It's very easy to pick up and get your head around the mechanics. Next up, I think following on from that, generally speaking, the games are quite quick. I've played, as I say, probably going on for about 10 different CCGs now, and you get some games where the games are like Artifact, for example. The games were really there was some kind of cool mechanics in that game, but it took forever. And if you get like a control mirror in something like Magic the Gathering, I mean, that can go on for 45 minutes. So the games here are, I would say they're not quite as fast as something like Marvel Snap, which is perhaps one of the quickest ones. But certainly it's quicker than Gwent. The games are quicker than Runeterra. They're quick. So they're generally pretty quick. You can get a game in anything from sort of 3.5 minutes to kind of like 8 minutes is kind of like my guess. There are a few decks that do go longer, like a few control decks that take a bit longer to win, but even those, like comparing to other games, it's still fairly quick to get games in. Next thing that's really good about Warpforge is, and I know people will have different opinions on this to me, but that's fine. I'm just giving you my opinion. I think progress is fair in this game. People talk about, is it pay to win? Is it free to play friendly? I think Warpforge is like somewhere in the middle of that continuum. Certainly when I think back to games I've played, I would say that games like Gwent, games like Legends of Runeterra were incredibly free to play friendly. Probably too free to play friendly in a way. That may well have actually led to those those games may have lasted a bit longer perhaps if they weren't quite as free to play friendly. So I wouldn't go as far as to say Warpforge is quite on that level, but it's by no means like a complete money sink like a lot of games out there are, where it's complete pay to win. I've kind of put money into Warpforge now, but I also progress certain factions on what you might call like a more free-to-play kind of basis. So I've kind of had a sense of the pacing of how it plays. And it's like anything, guys. If you're going to get into a CCG, how much time are you going to put into it? One way you can look at spending money is it just allows you, if you haven't got loads of time to spend on it, then basically putting money into the game will just speed up your ability to kind of collect, and so you can kind of play the stuff you want to play. I don't particularly love draft, but if you love draft, then it's much more free to play friendly because you can kind of get access to drafts. I think that's something that I haven't specified here, but it's really good. Like, they give you a free draft every single day, and then you get a thing called Blackstone draft, which is actually quite easy to come by, and you end up being able to get like more premium rewards from the Blackstone drafts. So I think if you play the game a lot and you're free to play, then you will quickly find yourself with a meta deck. Like, it will not take you like 6 months to get the top cards. It's not like hidden behind a secret paywall or anything like that. You will, and there's different mechanisms, whether it's like through the shop or the crystals, different mechanisms for actually getting cards as well. So I actually think the progress level for Warpforge is pretty balanced, and I think overall it's pretty fair. Next thing that's good about Warpforge is the community. Not only have we got absolutely wonderful content creators like yours truly, but we have a really great community. Like, there's a community Discord, and what my experience is that it's pretty active. People go on the different factions and they share, and people are generally quite open. There's a lot of like fun being had. Obviously, it's a card game community, and there's a lot of fun had on there, but generally speaking, like, people are pretty helpful. People are pretty kind of like open with like sharing like good deck lists and advice and stuff like that. So I think overall, I think the community is a really nice small little community that's built up around this game. So yeah. Next up, now, the devs are really open to feedback. I think this is brilliant because I've certainly played games where it doesn't matter what you say, like, the devs aren't listening, and I don't think that's true. I think in Warpforge the devs do listen. We've had a couple of really great examples. One example was we were going to get a release, and the devs kind of like, they put the changes out there for everyone to see in the community, and there's a massive backlash against this one particular card change. It was going to be the most broken thing. Everyone was like, oh, this is going to ruin the game, please don't release this. And the devs actually listened to that feedback, and in a very few days, space of a very few days, they actually reversed that decision, and what actually came out wasn't anywhere near as broken. Now, that's just one example, but there's plenty of other examples, and the devs are they're really cool. We actually interviewed one of the co-founders on our podcast, and yeah, and he's a really cool guy, and they're a small team, so they can't do everything, but they are pretty open to the feedback, and they try to take on board and make changes. So I think that's pretty cool. Another thing that I think is really good is we have these very innovative mechanics in Warpforge. Like, we have this thing called Remnant. So for those of you familiar with necrons, they're kind of like the futuristic skeletons, the futuristic undead faction, if you like, right? So you can imagine that a necron warrior, which is like a skeleton, gets killed. The card just sort of crumbles in on itself, and it sits there like a pile of rubble where the card was, and it's called a remnant. And then you can play like spells to reanimate that, and it can get back up. I just think, God, of all the different card games, there are certain mechanics like Like, you usually get a sort of guard, or in this game we call it Vanguard, which is like, you can't attack anything else until you've killed the Vanguard. That is a mechanic that's in almost every CCG, but something like the Remnant is really, really unique to Warpforge, and I think that's pretty cool. Another one to mention is how you actually attack, because in Hearthstone, or Magic, where you obviously have your health of the card, and then you have your attack value. Well, in Warpforge, we have 2 attack values, so we have melee attack and range attack. Sometimes those might be the same, so you might have like 3 and 3. Sometimes you might get a real disparity, so you might get like 6 and 1. And it just opens up another opportunity for interaction, another opportunity for strategy, right? Because you can be like, that thing's got brilliant melee attack, I'm not attacking that, but I am going to attack its range attack where it's weak with my card here that has really strong range attack. So it just adds another little kind of innovative dynamic to the way that cards trade. Something else that I really love about Warpforge is the practice and replay modes. So literally from starting out as a beginner, one of my favorite things, and whenever a new faction comes out, we have this thing called practice. So if I click on practice, let's say for example the new race that just came out not long ago are the Genestealer cults, and what you've got in here is 6 practice decks that are already made. And when I say practice decks, guys, I mean if we click on this, like this deck here, for example, is made up. This has got the legendary Warlord. So in your normal collection, this is a legendary card, Primus Sefer Rihanna. That we can tell from the little gold icon here. So this is a legendary card. It's a harder one to get. And similarly, when you look in the actual units themselves, you're going to find cards like this one, for example. That's a legendary card. So a couple of things there, right? You can immediately, from day one, practice playing with the top cards. I think that is a really brilliant feature. A lot of card games don't do that, guys. I'm not going to lie. That's pretty cool. Not only that, though, they do try to sort of put these into themes. So what I try to do is play all the practice decks through, especially when you get a new faction, because it kind of teaches you how the cards go together a little bit and what the kind of different themes and archetypes might be. And the real cherry on the top with the practice mode is that by playing practice games, you actually contribute towards your daily mission. So you can see I've done most of my daily missions, but I've got one here which says deploy 12 unstable troops. So I could go on to practice mode, find the Orkz, and find like a thing that has like lots and lots of unstable troops, like maybe this one. You can check the deck here and you can see like, oh yeah, killer cans, they're unstable, right? So I could just now play a practice mode game against the computer, against the AI, which is generally pretty easy, and I can claim my daily rewards from that. So I can learn, I get to use the best cards, and I get to complete my missions as well. Now the other thing you've got as well is in the battle log, you can kind of go ahead and you can replay games that you've played. So I had this game here with Abaddon against Frank Knight's Morven Val, and it was like a really close game, and I could pin this game so that I don't lose it, but at any point I could just click on play here and it will take me back into that game and I can re-watch the game. So that allows you to kind of like learn. Obviously it's useful for me because I can produce like content and things like that. So there are some pretty cool modes. Now the other good thing is there's lots and lots of deck slots. So again, when you go to building your decks, these are just the ones I've got in a minute, and you can see already, look at that, I've got loads of pre-built decks there. And in some, we take this for granted, but in a lot of card games, they really do limit the amount of deck slots, and it's really frustrating. So I'm glad that that's, as a deck builder, I think that's something that's great. Another thing we have is this thing called campaigns, which allow you to unlock your collection, essentially. Now, one of the things that I think is worth spending money on in this game, and it's the thing that I always advise people, you're going to spend money, get the premium campaign. It's the best value thing by a mile. In terms of your return on your investment of what you're going to get for that, there's nothing even comes close. So basically, if we look at the campaign, so for example, if I was to look at my ultramarine campaign, as you can see, you sort of start here and you open up these nodes as you gain experience, and in each of the nodes are all these rewards. It might be extra cards, it might be crystals, or different resources like wild cards and things, so you can create a type of card you want. And as you progress through this, the good thing about the premium campaign is all of these circles that have, all these nodes that have spiked, they have like a secondary reward, and only the premium campaign get the secondary reward. So if I click on this, for example, you can see here, this is the basic reward, but the premium reward, I get this cool card back. Sometimes, especially like towards the end, you even get things like a legendary wild card and things like that. So this really helps you kind of accelerate and speed up your your collection. So premium campaigns are excellent, and I've ended up getting all of them in the end. The next thing to talk about is alliances. Now, not all card games have this, but certainly other video games have this, right? So we're able to essentially form like a team. So I have an alliance called the Collegium Magistrorum, and there are 20 of us in that alliance. And the cool thing is that all of our points, if you like, that we collect in ranked pull together, and that gives our alliance like a score, like the combined total of all 20 of us. That gives our kind of alliance score. And so there's an alliance leaderboard. Now, this is a very new feature, so we haven't got into like too many kind of modes or competitions and stuff, but that's coming, right? So there's going to be like different competitions and different kind of raids and things that you're going to be able to do with your team. And this is really cool, guys, because I can tell you just from our alliance, what's been great about this is we've got our own Discord, we're sharing ideas, we're helping one another, and it's just a lot of fun. And it just, all of that good stuff we get from bonding with other humans when we sat behind our screen playing these card games is like a chance to really bring a human element in and kind of like feel part of a team. So definitely loving the alliances. And last but not least, I've got to tell you about ForgeCast. I mean, what's good in Warpforge is we have a podcast run by myself and the Ecclesiarch. And you know, in ForgeCast, we've had the devs on there. We cover like new releases. We talk quite openly about what we've been doing and how we feel about the game. So if you just want to have like a podcast to listen to while you're doing other chores and stuff about the game, really great, especially when you're just starting out as well. We do have podcasts. Alright, so let's talk about the bad. As I said, I do love this game, but that doesn't mean I can't be objective and tell you about some things that aren't where they need to be. Okay, so the first couple of things on here you'll notice are things that were on the good as well. Now, as I say, the ladder system is absolutely fantastic, but I thought it's only fair for me to point out a few things that are bad about the ladder system potentially. There aren't many. The key ones for me is that I can't see. If I click on my ranking, I can do this, right? But if I go on my friends, if I click on my friends, say I go on Lauren here and click on him, I can't actually see his breakdown of his rankings. I can only see his overall one. And for me, it's like, if you're going to have a ladder system, and then you should be able to see it. I can't even see it for fellow Alliance members like Lauren is. But I think the biggest one that people will talk about with the ladder system is that when you reach Legendary, some people might argue that you're a little bit forced to play forced to play the 4 factions. So some people might say that's a negative, because if you, for example, got your collection full on Eldar, but you don't on 3 others, then you may feel that you're a little bit hamstrung. And I agree with that, and I understand that pain. However, I would say I think that's a short-term pain, and I think that, if you love the game, and also if you've got to Legendary anyway, that it is worth going through in the short term and building up your other factions so that you can play, because your overall experience then will be better anyway, as I explained when I talked about the positives of the ladder. Next up, I think, is a couple of things about the alliances. Alliances are great. The things that are bad about them are you don't get to play against people that are in your own alliance, and I'm not sure if that's good for the game. It's kind of good in a way, like, because you don't want to like be taking points off your own teammates. That bit feels good, but the feel bad bit is like if you get an alliance that's really powerful. Like there's like a few alliances, maybe like 4 or 5 alliances that have a lot of top players in, and then it kind of means that you almost end up having top players not playing each other a little bit. So I think that's a little bit of a downside. And as I already mentioned, like I can't see people in my alliance's individual ranking scores and stuff. and that's something that I don't particularly love. One thing I forgot to mention on the ladder system as well is that you don't know how many games people have played. So, for example, I could have a score of 3k, you could have a score of 3k, but you might have only played 50 games, whereas I played 150 games to get that score. So, like, I think it's really useful seeing that information as well, because obviously the player who got the high score in only 50 games is obviously doing much better, and I just kind of wish that that was shown as well. Overall, these are good things, but there's just a couple of niggles with them. The thing I would say for somebody coming from a different card game, a different CCG, you probably will feel that the card pools are quite shallow. All right, so you know when you look at, let's take necrons for example, because they haven't had a what you call it, ion collection cards. Here we go. Necrons haven't had an expansion yet, right? So this is kind of like, you know, what is available to the Necrons. So you can kind of see going through the cards here. You're like, that's it. That is the Necrons, and it's not bad by any means. But I do think if you've come from, you know, if you've come from Magic or you've come from some of these games where there's thousands of cards, you will definitely feel that it is a little bit shallow. But you've got to remember, this is just year one of the game. It's still in early access, so this is something that's going to get better with time. But it does lead on to this next one, which for me is problematic, and that is the lack of archetypes. One of the things that makes card games fun for me is like that real kind of round robin of, you know, aggro decks and mid-range decks and like control decks and combo decks. And sometimes I think what happens in this game is we have these metas where everyone's got to be a tempo deck, or everyone's playing a control deck, and there's not actually many control decks, which is another problem as well. But I'd really love to see a broader range of archetypes. I do think that we could do some different types of like control tools, but equally some more dialed up aggro tools as well. So I'd just like to see a broader range of archetypes in the game, and I think it's a bit of a lack. And the other thing about archetypes is like the faction abilities themselves, right? So for example, we've got this faction called Chaos, and they have this ability where they can put a Dark Pact on a unit, and if they put a dark, it's like a blessing of the god, and it gives them buffs, right? Now the problem is that like the whole faction's designed around that, so there's no like alternative archetype really in Chaos, to the point that they even released a new warlord called Galaron, and he's not very good, not because he's actually not good and his ability's not good, but because he has no synergy with the Dark Pact thing, and that's what all the cards synergize with. So there is a little bit of a gap when it comes to archetypes, and I think playing something like Magic, there's just so many ways to build decks. There's so many ways, different kind of like ways to win, styles of and approaches, and cards that combo together. Whereas in this game, you end up sort of really just reaching for what are the good cards and putting them together. This also leads on to you know, one of the things that is bad is there are a few binary decks. So there's a deck, for example, right now that's very meta, and it's known as the Scarab deck. It's a Necron deck, and basically it's a deck where it has a very distinct playstyle. There is nothing your opponent can. There's almost nothing your opponent can do about what the Scarab deck is doing. And it's incredibly frustrating to play against. Now, it doesn't mean it can't be beaten. If you have answers, if you have a specific faction or deck that has an answer to it, then it just doesn't work really. But when it's in a meta like right now, where the other meta decks don't really have good answers to it, you feel like you're just not even playing. You feel like you're just sitting there and just waiting for 15 minutes to die. And it is not a good feeling. So there are a few binary decks. We did have an ultramarine deck a couple of seasons ago, which was a kind of similar thing where there were just a few really overpowered units. The deck got built around that, and it was like, press this to win. So that is a problem. The good news though in Warpforge is that the devs do a balance patch every month, so you generally don't have to wait much more than 3 weeks when you're in one of those metas before something gets tweaked and addressed. Okay, next thing that's bad about the game is we do suffer somewhat from push communications. And what I mean by that is, again, the developers are a small team, and you know, let's say a new release comes out, they'll probably line up 15 days worth of push communications, which are just automated, and they're kind of like obviously promoting the new cards, promoting the new products. Now that's all good, no problem with that. The problem is when there's something about the game that needs addressing and the community are very vocal about stuff, and there's not really any communication going on in that point, in that moment. So it can feel a little bit like there's not like any sort of two-way communication, and it can make the push communications feel annoying rather than exciting, which isn't really what they want anyway, right? They want people to get excited about new products, but if you've got these issues that devs aren't like interacting with, then it is a bit annoying. And again, that I understand why it's a small team, the rest of it, but it can be a little bit guilty of like a lot of push communication and not very much, which is why it was so good when we had Andreas on the podcast, one of the one of the co-founders, sorry, to come and talk about the game, because it was a real chance to get that open dialogue. Okay, next up, the reinforcement drop. So we have new cards are released in various different ways in this game, and when we get a new faction, it's very exciting. Absolutely love the buzz around the new faction. They're often some of the best times to be playing the game. But we also have these things called reinforcement drops. So that's where, for example, the next one is coming is for the necrons. So we already have a faction, but what we get is essentially 10 new cards. Now, the reason why I say this is bad is because I don't really think that, given the time it takes up from the devs to do this, I don't actually love this way of releasing cards into the game. Now, they have made some changes recently where they create a raid, which is like a 1-week event, where it is pretty good for particularly for like free-to-play players, because there's ways of getting some hold of some of the new cards if I'm playing in the raid, and it creates a bit of community fun, like trying to achieve a kind of community milestone basically to unlock cards and things. So the raid idea is pretty good, but what I don't like about reinforcement drops is more fundamental, I think. So you're only releasing 10 cards, and rather than being an expansion which expands the way you play, encourages new archetypes, more variety in deck building, what they tend to do, hence the word reinforcement, is reinforce what's already there. So I just find that the cards, if you get 10 new cards, maybe only 3 of them are actually even good. So they're not really changing the game that dramatically, and if they are, they're only adding to something that's already existing in the game rather than creating new opportunities, which to me just seems a little bit less fun. What I really wish was happening was in the expansion, instead of a reinforcement drops, we had like expansions where every faction got, 5 to 10 new cards. Now obviously might be a different way, it might be more work, I don't know, but it would certainly be much more exciting. And also trying to introduce new ways of playing the faction a little bit and evolving that. Okay, next up on what's bad. Unfortunately, in Warpforge, we do suffer from some annoying bugs. God, I've lost 4 games this season to a bug where at the start of the game, you get 2 cards that pop up, which are called defense cards. When you're going second, you can select which one you want, and it's like a little buff that you get because you're going last, essentially. One of the bugs here, though, is that even when you select the card, they just stick on the screen. So now you're trying to play a game with these 2 giant cards blocking 85% of your view of the screen, and it's impossible, so you have to resign, and then you lose. And all the progress that you just previously made, you then just lose in MMR. Very frustrating experience. And that's not the only bug. There's some other bugs where people log out. If you do lose connection with the game, you can't get back into a game like you can in Hearthstone by rebooting it and stuff. So there's quite a number. I'm not going to go into them because that'd be boring, but there's just a lot of annoying bugs and some of them have been around for quite a long time, and that is a bit of a hindrance to the player experience, I'm not going to lie. Alright, next up, to me there are just a lot of missing features, and again, this might be because I'm a kind of veteran CCG player, but one of the things that bugs me the most is when you're trying to build a deck, that you can't build an incomplete deck. Like if you look on my Magic the Gathering thing, I've got about 20 incomplete decks. Now why is that important? Well, let's say I'm in here and I go, right, I want to create an Orc deck. Okay, I'm going to take this guy here. And you go, right, I've got this kind of shell for an idea. It has Makari And then basically what it has is, if I put the word flank in here, for example, yeah, it has all these flankers. So it's kind of like going to be a reactive removal deck. Flank basically means that the turn that you play the card can attack, right? So you can see here, like in Orkz, we've got quite a lot of flank cards. So I'm gonna put these. So these 11 cards now, you need 30 cards to a deck. This is my flank shell. Now what I want to be able to do is go flank shell, and I might want to build 3 decks off of this, or maybe I don't have all the cards yet. And I want to be able to save this and come out of it, but I can't. You can only save it when you've put 30 cards in that you have. Equally, let's say I've put a really good deck out there on the content, and you go, that's a cool deck, I like BJ's guide on that, let me import the deck code. So you import the deck code and go, I haven't got 3 of those cards. It'll show you don't have 3 of the cards, but you can't save the deck. You've got to replace those 3 cards with 3 cards you've got in order to save the deck. So it's really frustrating, because you might be like, well, I want to build towards that deck, and now I'm going to forget what it was. So like not being able to play building complete decks is one. And I've already mentioned, like, when you click on your friends list, like being able to see the proper information about their where they are in the in terms of their ranks and stuff like that. So there's other details as well, but I think there's just a couple of like quality of life missing features that aren't there. Now, unfortunately, another real drawback coming from something like Legends of Runeterra, for example, there's no open data from the game itself. Now, I'm not a tech nerd, but what you will see in other games like Runeterra is that community members who do have more technical expertise than me, they can like tap into the open source data and kind of pull out things like win rates. So, for example, on Magic the Gathering, you've got a website called untapped.gg, and that will show you a meta report, and it'll give you daily breakdowns, and you can kind of say legend rank only or whatever, and it can show you like the amount of it'll basically show you what the best deck is that's got the most wins and stuff, how many games have been played with it, how many wins, what's in the deck, that type of stuff. Now, that's all stuff that a community website can manipulate if they've got access to the data. Unfortunately, we don't have that here. So you are going to find a lack of community sites, and there isn't going to be anything like they had, unfortunately, there for Runeterra and Magic. And probably one that hurts me the most is no tournaments. I mean, I have really enjoyed the tournament. Kind of features in other games, like watching a tournament on a weekend and trying out the decks that were played there and seeing innovations and having the commentary and all of that stuff. It's just so much fun. It really elevates these card games for me, and it's makes it like a bit of an esport. And we just don't have them in Warpforge. Now, some of it is to do with like functionality, and I just realized over here. Yeah, some of it's to do with like functionality and whatnot in game that make it difficult. I'm certainly looking to help get some of these off the ground, but I need a bit more technical support. So we do have a lack of tournaments. So there you go, guys. Overall, as I say, I think Warpforge has been out 10 months, is a really solid CCG, easy to get into, a lot of fun to play. There's the play-by-plays are really great, and all of these positives that I've listed, there are definitely things that aren't where I want them to be, definitely things that you will notice are missing if you've played other CCGs. But I think the good thing is that we're only 10 months in, so there's a lot of cool stuff still to come, and the game has been getting better and better as more and more features have been added. So yeah, I mean, I don't often like putting like a number on it, but I just thought it might be a cool way to wrap it up. If you wanted the kind of BJ opinion, kind of what would I give it? I think right now, in September 2024, I would say Warpforge is an 8 out of 10. Let me know in the comments what you think to this video, if there's any things that any pros and cons that you think you would add to my list. If you feel you've enjoyed this video, then please hit that like button or subscribe to the channel. I have a wealth of content. If you are going to get into the game, go back and check out some of my videos, and I post regularly on the game. And so yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. Thanks for all the support. Until next time, I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy, guys.